Hello friends, in this video I will share a comparison between Australia and Canada with regards to immigration. When it comes to immigration across the globe, Australia and Canada pop out in terms of ease of immigration. However, you still need to decide between the two. So in this video I will share with you different factors that you can make use of in order to make your decision with regards to where do you want to make your move, whether it's Australia or Canada. Now previously on my channel I uploaded a video which was a short video where I kind of called out two key factors that you may need to consider. Rather, they are the primary factors that you should be considering when making a decision or choice between Australia and Canada. I got a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback on that video. And I thought it would make sense if I can elaborate more and make a longer video where I touch on different other factors which I have not called out in that short video already. Plus, also elaborate the factors that I called out as the primary factors in that short video and explain more as to what I mean by them. Now, let me call out that I have a personal bias because I immigrated to Canada. I'm a Canadian now, and I made use of these factors that I will call out in this video in order to aid my decision making. However, what I will make sure is that I make use of the data in order to prove my case or my preference or my point, or elaborate those factors as against just saying that since I've lived in Canada, I prefer Canada over Australia. I chose Canada because it made sense to me across those different factors. That may not be the case for you. For you, it may be Australia. So what we will do in this video is make sure that we make the decision using data and evaluate each of those factors. Now, one important call out before we move forward. In case you like this video, please don't shy away from pressing the like button and also the subscribe button, as this keeps me motivated and also helps to notify you as soon as I put a new content on this channel. On this channel, I post content pertaining to financial and career success for early and mid-career professionals. Other than that, if you want me to continue making unbiased content like this, you can support me on patreon.com. I will leave the link to my Patreon page in the description of this video. Now, what I will not do in this video is try to qualify the immigration system or comparison of the immigration system between Canada and Australia and which country it is easier for you to immigrate to. It all depends on your profession, your number of years, your education. There are a number of factors and they are different between Canada and Australia. What I would recommend is for you to go online and fill out a rough scoring or a free scoring template or a survey. I'm sure you'll find a number of them on Google where you can put in your information with regards to your education, your income, your age, your family size, XYZ for Australia and Canada, and it will tell you what points will you get after filling out all those details. If your points are good enough and solid enough for you to qualify for both of them, then this video becomes even more important because now you have a choice between Australia and Canada, and you can go through the factors that I will share in this video in order to make that choice. However, if your points or score is less in one of the countries and there is a clear winner, let's say Australia is a clear winner for you because your points for immigrating to Canada are not enough, which will enable you to immigrate to Canada, then Canada is out of the picture, and then there is no point in really reviewing this video because it's a clear choice, which is you don't have a choice. It's just Australia, that is if you want to immigrate. So for you to move further in this video, I strongly recommend you make sure that you know what are your point scale across the two countries and that you are kind of in the race or can qualify to immigrate easily in both the countries. Now, with that said, let me call out one fact, which is for Canada, each year they are attracting somewhere around 400 to 500,000 immigrants, while for Australia, they are only attracting or they are only passing or clearing around 190,000 immigrants, which is almost half of or less than half of what Canada is doing, which goes to show that the competition would be much higher with regards to immigrating to Australia versus Canada because the number of available seats or the number of possibilities to get into Canada for an average immigrant are higher because there's more availability because they have a higher quota as against to the quota or as against to the availability they have for Australia. So I would say the competitiveness would be higher in Australia versus Canada. But again, as I said, this also depends on your field. Let's say you have a qualification or you have a certain degree or a field which is very specific, which is something that either of the countries is looking for, they want that particular individual to be in, then you are already beating all the competition because you rank on the higher end. However, if you have like a general qualification, you are pretty average kind of a profile, then I would say Australia might be slightly difficult because it may be more competitive as compared to Canada. But nevertheless, in this video, we will be focusing on things like income, things like opportunity, things like cost of living, and I will also call out 2 additional but very, very, very important factors towards the end of this video. So make sure you stay tuned. And those factors are not just related to, rather they are not related to income or cost of living at all. They are related to lifestyle, but they are very important. And I highly recommend that you stay tuned till the end of the video so you get to know about those factors as well. Now here also let me add one more thing, which is if you move to Canada, you only need 3 years to stay in Canada before you can apply for Canadian citizenship. While when you go to Australia as a PR holder, you have to stay in Australia for 4 years before you can apply for Australian citizenship. So let's say if you're someone who's thinking of getting the immigration, getting the citizenship, and then moving out of that country, then I would say it will take you longer in Australia to get the citizenship because you'll have to stay there for 4 years and you cannot move out of the country within those 4 years. So you have to stay there for 4 years. While in Canada, in case of Canada, you can move out earlier. This was the case for me. I wanted to move to US. So I lived in Canada. I spent 3 years there. I completed my time, applied for the citizenship, and then I moved to US. While for Australia, I would have had to stay 4 years before I could do that move. It's just 1 year, but I think 1 year is pretty important compared to 3 versus 4. However, if you're someone who wants to live there forever, then it really doesn't matter whether it's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. As long as you know you'll get the citizenship, you can wait it out because you know you're not moving anywhere else. So this is primarily important for those folks who are making a decision with regards to moving to either Canada or Australia, taking the citizenship, and then moving back to where they came from or moving across the globe. Now let me call out the sponsors of this video, which is Kindle by Amazon. The day I got introduced to Kindle, I stopped reading physical books completely. Given the ease of the number of books I can carry because I can store them on my Kindle, I can carry it easily wherever I travel. I can buy any book with a click of a button. Because of all this ease, I became a fan. It became so easy and so convenient for me to read books that I've started to read more books since I started making use of Kindle. So in case you want to buy your first Kindle or upgrade to a better version, you can do it using the link in the description of this video. Now let's get rolling back into it. Now let's first and foremost start with the economic opportunity, which I believe is the primary factor that you should make use of or evaluate when making a choice between Australia and Canada. Let's start with the size of the economy. Now, Canadian economy in 2022 was somewhere around $2.1 trillion, while Australian economy was somewhere around $1.7 trillion. So Australian economy is slightly smaller than Canadian economy, which kind of goes to show, you can translate it into in terms of there are more economic opportunities in Canada versus that in Australia. But again, at the same time, I would say that they're not too far away either. Like one is 2.1, one is 1.7. With Australia, you do have a benefit of accessing New Zealand's economy as well. But the issue is New Zealand economy is around $225 to $50 billion economy. So it's like peanuts. However, in case of Canada, it is linked to the biggest economy of the world, which is United States, which is $25 trillion economy. So if you move to Canada, while you're moving to Canada, but you also in some ways create an access to the North American economy, and you can tap into the North American economy. And I am a living example of that, which as I moved to Canada, I lived there 3 years, got my citizenship, then lived another 1.5 years. And then I decided to move to US. And I was able to move to US because it was relatively an easy transition. There are some requirements with regards to work visa. However, it is far more easy to move from Canada to US versus from Australia to US. And now I have access to not just $2.1 trillion economy in Canada, but the $25 trillion economy in the United States. And my opportunities with regards to job, regards to income are massive. And another good thing, which I'll talk more in detail, is when you compare taxation. So taxation are usually high in Australia and Canada because they pay for your primarily Medicare system because that is free and there is better social security. So the taxation is very high. However, taxation is very low in US. So you get access to higher income, more job opportunities, and less taxation while moving to US. So that is only possible or primarily easier if you move to Canada versus moving to Australia. The issue with Australia is it is just very separate from rest of the world geographically. So that is kind of a challenge. While for Canada, you are like linked to world's economy, world's biggest economy, and the bigger chunk of world's economy, which is United States. So you get all that benefit by being linked to or by being attached to US. Now, talking about income levels, there are two ways I went about it or I can go about in this video. One is if we compare the minimum wage. So the minimum wage in Australia is 23.23 Australian dollars, which is around 15.5 USD. While the minimum wage for Canada is lower, which is 16.65 Canadian dollars, which turns out to be 12.5, 12.6 USD. So it's approximately $3 lower in Canada versus Australia. So this is one way of gauging the income comparison between Australia and Canada. The other thing that I did was I thought let's pick up a global company which hires across the globe. And one company that came to my mind was Amazon. And I was like, let's look at Amazon's job posting on Glassdoor in Australia versus Canada and compare the salaries of similar kind of roles. So here in this search that I did, I found one which was area manager. So area manager role in Ontario, London is costing $80,000 to 90,000 Canadian dollars, while an area manager in Australia is $80,000 to $113,000. So let's take $110,000 and $90,000 as a comparison. So 110,000 Australian dollars in USD would be somewhere around 73,000 USD, while 90,000 Canadian dollars in USD would be somewhere around 67,000 USD. So Canadian income levels are slightly lower than what you can get in Australia, but again, the delta is not huge. Here another comparison that I have is site procurement manager in Australia, again making 100k Australian dollars, and it is making 87,000 Canadian dollars. So again, after conversion, the delta is not too huge. So in my opinion, when you move to Canada for those 3 years, you may have kind of same opportunities in terms of job that you will find in Australia because they have similar GDPs. Income levels would be similar as well. However, after 3 years, once you get your citizenship, it is much easier to tap into the US economy as against just being in Australia. Now comes cost of living. Here for cost of living, I have done some analysis as well, where I compared Australia versus Canada in terms of cost of living. And if we see, the cost of living is significantly high in Australia. One chunk is childcare cost, which is approximately 47.6% lower in Canada versus Australia. If you look at shopping, clothing and shoes, they are all very cheap in Canada. Looking at rent, that is also very cheap in Canada. Looking at the apartment prices is also very cheap in Canada. Similarly, if you look at utilities, except for mobile costs, which is cheaper in Australia, the utilities happen to be much cheaper in Canada with regards to electricity, heating and cooling. Similarly, transportation is lower in Canada. And when it comes to grocery, that is kind of a mixed plate. Rather, for grocery, I find primarily Australia being more cheaper. If you compare rice, if you compare milk, and if you compare bread, it's much cheaper in Australia versus Canada. However, I would say rent, transportation and utility and the fuel cost, which is also very high in Australia versus Canada, make up the bigger chunk. All in all, if you do a simple Google search, you'll find that Australia's cost of living is around 15% higher than Canada's cost of living. Now let's also talk about the income tax. When we compare income tax between Australia and Canada, and I've done that comparison as well, we find that the income tax is higher in Canada versus Australia. So the average tax rate if you are earning 100,000 Canadian dollars in Canada is 30%, while the average tax rate if you are earning 100,000 Australian dollars in Australia is 25%. Also, you can argue here that the marginal tax is also low, which is the tax you pay on each increasing income or the higher end of the income. That is around 35%, 34.5% in Australia, and around 43% in Canada. So while the income levels are slightly higher in Australia versus Canada, but not massively high, the cost of living is significantly high in Australia, but then the income taxes are significantly or majorly lower in Australia versus Canada. All in all, I would say you will kind of net out at the same place. But for me, again, I'm repeating myself, which is the biggest benefit of being in Canada is the opportunities that you have in terms of jobs, especially in the long term, given the access to the US market. Now, before we move into talking about the lifestyle factors, the one factor that comes out or pops out every time when you make a comparison between Canada and Australia is the weather, because it gets much colder in Canada as compared to Australia, which means a lot of snow and a lot of low temperatures. In Ontario, for that matter, it can go as low as minus 35 degrees Celsius, feels like, which is pretty cold for someone like me coming from Southeast Asia. However, the technology has very much advanced. The houses here are centrally heated. You really don't feel what is going on outside, because even if the temperatures are low, you can just walk around in your t-shirt. When you sit in your car, it's also heated as well. You preheat it when you sit in your car and then you go to your workplace. So if you're a white-collared worker, you would hardly feel any pain with regards to low temperatures. It is only when it snows a lot, there is a blockage of traffic and it becomes difficult for you to commute during that day. But usually it's a one-day affair, the snows drop, and the next day the government cleans up the roads and you're fine. And this happens like twice, thrice, or maybe 4 times a year, and that's it. Other than that, I've never found the cold to be painful. However, the challenging part is that the winters in Canada are for 6 months, which means that for you to really enjoy life in Canada, you really have to enjoy winters, which is you have to get into winter sports like skiing, like ice skating. And this is all I did. I was like, if I'm here, I cannot just sit in the house for 6 months, and I need to get myself and assimilate myself with the Canadian way of living. So I taught myself skiing, I taught myself ice skating, and so on and so forth. Now, these are the challenges you may not face in Australia, but if you are someone who's open to learning new things and assimilating themselves and adapting to the changed weathers, then you, my friend, will enjoy the Canadian weather and the Canadian winters. Now, before I end the video, here comes the 2 key factors which are not linked to income, cost of living, taxation, nothing. They're linked to lifestyle. Number 1 is social circle. Assuming you net out on all other factors, then you need to consider where you have a bigger social network, like in terms of friends and families. It is very easy to just move to a different country and start working there, but you also need to live a life there, and you also need to establish a life there. You need to have a social circle. So it is very important for you to know someone in the country or city that you are moving into who can help you assimilate, who can be your social circle, who can introduce you to other social network as well, and so you may have a social life. And hence it is important for you to consider where your family or your friends are. For me, the choice was Canada because my wife's family, most of them were already in Canada. So it became very easy for us to come here, get assimilated in the Canadian way of living, have a good social circle. We would be out and about on weekends, connecting with friends, meeting family and all. So it was really easy for us to come here and not miss home a lot. The second and another very important thing for me was the ease of sponsoring my parents, which is very hard in Australia. There is no route by which you can call in your parents as well to Australia and they can move in with you and become Australian citizens. However, in case of Canada, there is a process. Now, it's not a very easy process, or I would say it's not a process which is 100% given because it's a lottery system. So you apply in a lottery system where you enroll yourself or your parents, and they will do a draw, and the top X thousand or X number of parents will be granted PR. So, for instance, in my case, I've already applied for my parents' PR as well. What I mean to say here is at least Canada gives you an opportunity, and there is a chance whereby which my parents can come into the draw where they can become PR holders. This doesn't exist for Australia at all. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully after watching this video, you will be able to make a better decision with regards to whether you should immigrate to Canada or Australia. In case you like this video, I'm sure you'll also like another video on my channel where I talk about what are the 7 mistakes that you need to avoid when moving to Canada. So check out that video. Other than that, I have another video where I talk about how you can land a job in Canada in the fastest way possible. You can check out that video here. Thank you.